I want to talk a little bit about friction because I was grading those quizzes and I saw some things that were a little bit bothersome. Okay, friction is a force. It opposes motion. That's all it does. Okay, if something's moving, friction opposes it. And if there's a force trying to start an object moving, friction opposes that too. So it opposes motion or intended motion. Okay. Now there's two types of friction that we're going to talk about. There's static and there's kinetic. Static means not moving. Okay, so if two surfaces are in contact but they're not sliding, then it's static friction. So if it's a box being pushed across the floor, then it's kinetic friction. Okay, while it's sliding. If you're trying to start the box moving across the floor and it's not moving, then it's static friction. So kinetic is in motion, and really it's sliding, because if you have a tire rolling across the ground, it's technically static friction since the two surfaces are not sliding past each other. Okay, not going to get too much into that, but okay, you do need to know the difference. Kinetic friction acts when the object is sliding, static friction acts when it's not moving. And so I've had a couple questions about, well, what kind of friction acts if I've got a box sliding on the floor? Well, if the box is moving this way, there's several forces on the floor, on the box, sorry. There's the force due to gravity, which is down. There's the normal force. Now remember, the normal force is called normal. Normal means perpendicular. The normal force is always perpendicular to the surface. Okay? And then there's one more force here, and that force is friction. And if this thing's actually moving, if it's got a velocity in one direction, then the kinetic friction force acts against that motion. Okay? And that's it. That's simple friction on a flat surface. Okay? If somebody's trying to start this block moving, but it's not in motion, then static friction acts against the force until the block starts to move. Okay? And we have two equations. We have the kinetic frictional force is equal to the normal force times the coefficient of kinetic friction, and we have the static frictional force is equal to the normal force times the coefficient of static friction. Okay? These two equations are essentially the same. The difference is it in motion or is it not? And generally speaking, static friction is greater than kinetic friction. It's harder to start something moving than to keep something moving. Okay? Generally speaking. There are a bunch of these frictional coefficients listed in the book, but essentially all this number is, it's going to be less than 1 typically. And it just shows you what percent, if you like, of the normal force causes friction, or how much of the normal force is the frictional force. Okay? And the only way to make this complicated is if it's not on a horizontal surface, because if you go on an incline, okay, then the normal force is not actually right against gravity, so you cannot say that the normal force equals the gravitational force. You have to find the component of gravity that the normal force is balancing. So then you have this side right here to deal with, which will be equal to that side right there. Okay, so kinetic friction and static friction are both frictional forces that opposes motion. Kinetic friction acts when an object is sliding. Static friction acts when the object is at rest.